Just sign it. The words echoed through the living room so violently that the framed family photos on the wall seemed to tremble. A stack of legal documents slammed onto my father's old oak dining table. The same table where he'd taught me how to play chess when I was 7. The same table where we celebrated every birthday, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas after Mom passed away. The same table where we'd shared our final breakfast together just 6 days earlier. Now, someone wanted me to sign away everything that remained of him. I stared at the signature line, my name, already typed neatly beneath it. All I had to do was pick up the pen. Across from me stood my brother-in-law, Derek Lawson. Tall, perfectly groomed, tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. An expensive silver watch peeked from beneath his cuff. Everything about him screamed success. Everything except his eyes. There wasn't a trace of compassion in them, only impatience. Behind him stood my older sister, Vanessa Parker. She folded her arms across her chest and avoided looking directly at me, not because she felt guilty, because she didn't want to see the pain on my face. Derek pushed the pen toward me. His voice was calm, almost friendly. Grace, your father is gone. The lawyers have already prepared everything. This doesn't have to be difficult. He tapped the papers. Just sign it. I looked down, then slowly lifted my eyes toward the wooden display case hanging above the fireplace. Inside rested my father's military medals, a neatly folded American flag, and a photograph of him wearing his army dress uniform decades before I was born. Every morning before school, he used to salute that flag. Not because anyone was watching, because respect isn't something you perform, it's something you live. His voice echoed inside my mind. Never let anyone rush you into making a permanent decision. I looked back at Derek, then quietly said, "No." His polite smile disappeared. "I'm sorry?" I said. "I'm not signing." The room became silent. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, everything changed. My name is Grace Parker. I'm 31 years old. People often ask me why I never got married, why I stayed in my hometown when everyone else seemed determined to leave, why I worked only part-time as an occupational therapist despite graduating with honors. The answer is simple. 5 years ago, my father became sick, very sick, and I made a choice I'd never regret, even if it cost me almost everything. My father, Colonel Thomas Parker, served in the United States Army for 34 years. He wasn't famous. He never appeared on television. He never wrote books about leadership. He didn't need to. Anyone who met him walked away knowing exactly what kind of man he was: strong, patient, honest. The type of person who returned extra change when a cashier made a mistake. The type of neighbor who shoveled elderly people's driveways before clearing his own. The type of father who never missed a school concert, even after working 16-hour days. Growing up, I honestly believed everyone's father was like mine. It wasn't until college that I realized how rare he truly was. After Mom died from breast cancer when I was 14, Dad became both parents overnight. He learned how to braid my hair. Terribly. He burned nearly every pancake he ever tried to make. He once packed my school lunch with dog treats instead of beef jerky because both bags looked almost identical. When I opened my lunchbox, my friends laughed so hard they cried. That evening, Dad looked horrified. "I'm the worst cook in America," he declared. I couldn't stop laughing. "No, you're just creatively challenged." From then on, every Saturday became cooking experiment day. Some meals were disasters. Others became family traditions. What mattered wasn't the food. It was that he never stopped trying. My older sister Vanessa was 6 years older than me. By the time Mom passed away, she was already in college. Beautiful, confident, always the smartest person in every room. People naturally admired her, including me. She taught me how to apply makeup, how to drive, how to survive high school. Back then, she wasn't greedy, she wasn't selfish, she was simply ambitious. Dad admired that. Dream big, he'd tell both of us, but never become so successful that you forget who's standing beside you. I remembered those words. I don't think Vanessa did. Everything changed 5 years ago. Dad called me one afternoon. His voice sounded unusually quiet. "Kiddo." I dropped my coffee again. I smiled. "So, I think something's wrong with my hand." Within 2 weeks, the doctors confirmed it. Parkinson's disease. I still remember sitting beside him in the neurologist's office. He didn't ask how long he had. He didn't ask whether it would hurt. He asked one question: will I still recognize my daughters? The doctor smiled gently. Yes. Dad nodded once. Then we'll handle the rest. That was my father, always worried about everyone except himself. The first year wasn't terrible. A slight tremor, occasional stiffness. Life continued almost normally. Dad still mowed his own lawn, still volunteered every Thursday at the Veterans Center, still insisted on changing the oil in my car himself. Then one afternoon, I heard something crash in the garage. I ran outside. Dad was sitting on the concrete floor, his toolbox scattered around him, the wrench still clutched in his shaking hand. I slipped, he said quickly, almost embarrassed. I helped him stand. His hands trembled harder than I'd ever seen. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of dying, fear of becoming dependent. 3 weeks later, I packed my apartment. My coworkers thought I was making a mistake. You'll destroy your career, one of them warned. Another said, you need to live your own life. Maybe they were right. But when I imagined Dad sitting alone in that house, trying to hide every fall, pretending everything was fine, the decision became easy. Family isn't measured by convenience, it's measured by presence. I moved home the following Saturday. Dad argued for nearly an hour. I can still manage. I know, I answered. But now, you don't have to. Those 5 years became the hardest and most meaningful years of my life. Every morning started at 6. Medication, breakfast, physical therapy exercises, doctor appointments, groceries, laundry, paperwork. By evening, I'd often be too exhausted to eat dinner, but then Dad would smile and say, movie night? Somehow, I'd always find the energy. We watched old westerns, military documentaries, baseball games. Sometimes we simply sat on the porch listening to crickets. Those quiet evenings became priceless. Vanessa visited less and less. At first, every other weekend, then once a month. Eventually, only birthdays and holidays. She always had reasons: business trips, charity events, dinner parties. Her husband Derek owned a successful commercial construction company. Money came easily to them. Time, apparently didn't. Dad never complained. Whenever I mentioned it, he smiled. People love differently. I wanted to believe him. One snowy December evening, Dad asked me to bring an old wooden box from the attic. Inside were military photographs, letters, newspaper clippings. He handed me one faded picture. A young soldier stood beside a military jeep, barely 20 years old, grinning from ear to ear. Who's that handsome guy? I teased. He laughed. I had hair back then. We spent 3 hours looking through old memories, stories I'd never heard, friends he'd lost, dreams he'd once had. As I placed everything back inside the box, he gently stopped me. Leave the medals, he said. I want to polish them tomorrow. He never got the chance. About 4 months before he died, Dad surprised me with an unusual request. Grace, if anything happens to me, I need you to promise something. I looked up from the crossword puzzle we were pretending to solve together. Anything. Promise you'll never let guilt make your decisions. I frowned. Why would guilt? He smiled sadly. Because people use guilt. When truth isn't enough. His words felt strangely specific. Dad, what are you talking about? He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm talking about protecting your heart. Nothing more, nothing less. His health declined much faster after that. Hospital visits became frequent. Walking became difficult, then impossible without assistance. One evening, while helping him into bed, he whispered, I'm sorry. I looked confused. For what? For changing your life. My eyes immediately filled with tears. You didn't, he smiled weakly. I watched you give up promotions, vacations, relationships. You sacrificed so much. I leaned forward. No, I invested it. In you. He closed his eyes, then quietly cried. It was the only time in my entire life I'd ever seen my father cry. The funeral drew hundreds of people, former soldiers, neighbors, teachers, police officers, men and women whose lives he'd quietly touched over decades. The military honor guard folded the American flag with perfect precision. 21 rifle shots echoed across the cemetery. A bugler played taps. When the folded flag was placed into my hands, I couldn't breathe. The officer knelt before me. On behalf of a grateful nation, his words blurred together, because all I could think was, I'd never hear Dad call me kiddo again. Vanessa cried too. She hugged me tightly after the service. "We'll get through this," she whispered. For one brief moment, I believed we'd finally become sisters again. I was wrong. Exactly 48 hours later, she arrived at Dad's house with Derek. He carried a leather briefcase. She carried expensive coffee. Neither carried flowers. Neither asked how I was doing. We sat at Dad's dining table. Derek opened the briefcase, removed several legal documents, then smiled as though this were an ordinary business meeting. "So, let's handle the estate." I frowned. "I haven't even met with Dad's attorney." "You won't need to," he replied. "The paperwork has already been prepared." He slid the documents across the table. The first page read, "Property Transfer Agreement." I stared at it. "This isn't Dad's will." Derek smiled calmly. "No, it's simpler." "Simpler for who?" He pointed toward the bottom of the page. The signature line, then looked directly into my eyes. "Grace, just sign it." For several long seconds, I simply stared at the paperwork. The words blurred together, not because I couldn't read them, because I couldn't believe them. The heading across the first page read, "Voluntary Property Transfer Agreement." The second paragraph stated that I was willingly surrendering every legal interest in my father's home, the surrounding land, his retirement accounts, and several financial assets. In exchange, I would receive a one-time payment of $100,000. I looked up slowly. "What is this?" Derek folded his hands together, as though he were leading a business presentation. "It's a settlement." "A settlement?" He nodded confidently. "The attorneys believe this is the cleanest solution." I frowned. "I haven't spoken to any attorneys." "You don't need to." "I absolutely do." He smiled. "Grace, lawyers only complicate emotional situations." I almost laughed. "No. People who rush grieving families complicate emotional situations." Vanessa sighed loudly. "We're not rushing you." I looked at her. "You came here 2 days after Dad's funeral." She crossed her arms. "The estate has to be handled. The flowers from his funeral haven't even wilted." Silence. I looked around the dining room. Dad's reading glasses still rested beside his favorite chair. His coffee mug was still sitting in the sink because I couldn't bring myself to wash it. His jacket still hung beside the front door. The house still felt like he might walk into the room at any moment and ask if anyone wanted breakfast. To me, he wasn't gone yet, not completely, but to them, he had already become paperwork. Derek slid the pen closer again. "Sign today. We'll wire the money tomorrow." I pushed the pen back across the table. "I'm not selling my father's home." "It isn't selling." "It absolutely is." Vanessa leaned forward. "You can't afford this place." "I haven't decided whether I'm staying." She shrugged. "You don't have many options." Those words hurt more than I expected. Not because they were cruel, because they sounded rehearsed, as though she'd been discussing my future, without me. I quietly folded the documents closed. "I want to see Dad's will." Derek answered immediately, "You don't need to." I looked straight into his eyes. "Why?" He smiled. "Because this agreement replaces unnecessary legal complications." My stomach tightened. "That's not what I asked." He remained perfectly calm. "Your father wanted peace. So do we." I whispered, "Then stop asking me to sign." The room fell silent. Outside, rain tapped gently against the kitchen windows. The sound reminded me of another rainy afternoon years earlier. Dad and I had been cleaning the garage. I was 19, impatient, trying to finish quickly before meeting friends. Dad had been restoring an old wooden rocking chair. The paint was chipped. Several joints had come loose. I remember asking, "Why don't you just buy a new one?" He smiled without looking up. "Because not everything valuable is convenient." I laughed. "It's just a chair." He looked at me. "No, it's where your mother used to read books to both of you." Suddenly, I didn't see an old chair anymore. I saw memories. Dad gently sanded another piece of wood. People who only understand prices never understand value. At the time, I thought he was talking about furniture. Now, I realized he'd been teaching me something much bigger. Back in the present, Derek stood, walked slowly toward the fireplace. He admired the military display hanging above it. "Beautiful collection," he said casually. Then, almost absent-mindedly, he added, "I suppose museums would pay well for these." Something inside me snapped. I stood immediately. "They're not for sale." He raised both hands. "I was only making conversation." "No, you were calculating." Vanessa stood too. "Grace, please stop making everything emotional." I stared at my own sister. "Our father died. How exactly should I behave?" She looked away. For just a second, I thought I saw guilt on her face, but it disappeared almost instantly. Derek checked his expensive watch. "I have another appointment." He gathered the paperwork. "We'll come back tomorrow." "No," he stopped. "I mean it." "Don't." He smiled politely. "You don't have a choice." "I do. I'll speak with Dad's attorney first." For the first time, the smile disappeared completely. "Dad's attorney?" he asked carefully. "Yes." "When?" "As soon as I can schedule it." He looked at Vanessa. The two of them exchanged a quick glance, barely noticeable, but I caught it. Why would that make them nervous? They left 10 minutes later. I watched their car disappear down the street. The house became painfully quiet again. For the first time since the funeral, I truly understood what loneliness sounded like. No television, no footsteps upstairs, no soft humming from Dad's study while he read history books. Only silence. Heavy, unforgiving silence. That evening, I wandered through every room, not looking for anything, just trying to feel close to him. His bedroom remained exactly as he'd left it. The novel he'd been reading still rested on the nightstand. A pair of reading glasses sat folded beside it. His slippers waited neatly beside the bed. I gently picked one up, then immediately put it back. Somehow, moving even the smallest thing felt wrong. Around midnight, I couldn't sleep, so I walked into Dad's study. It had always been my favorite room. Dark wooden bookshelves covered every wall. Military history, American history, biographies, old leather-bound classics. The room smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. His large oak desk sat beside the window, exactly as it always had. His fountain pen rested across an unfinished crossword puzzle. The final clue remained blank. 7 letters. Courage. I smiled sadly. He would have figured it out eventually. He always did. As I sat in his chair, something caught my attention. The bottom drawer wasn't fully closed. It stuck out only half an inch. Dad hated messy drawers. I reached down and gently pulled it open. Inside, beneath several folders, lay a small cream-colored envelope. My heart immediately began beating faster. Across the front, written in my father's unmistakable handwriting, were 4 simple words: "For Grace, alone." My hands started trembling. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter. The first line shattered me. "Kiddo." No one else had ever called me that. Only him. Tears blurred the page before I read another word. "If you're reading this, then I've already gone where every old soldier eventually hopes to go. Don't waste too many tears. I had a wonderful life, mostly because I got to spend it watching you grow into a woman your mother would have been incredibly proud of." I pressed my hand against my mouth, trying not to sob. The empty house somehow felt even quieter. The letter continued. "I know something about you. You're going to blame yourself. You'll wonder if you should have noticed something sooner. If another doctor, another medicine, another hospital might have given us more time. Grace, stop. A daughter isn't supposed to defeat time. She's only supposed to love her father while she has him. You did that beautifully." By now, I couldn't stop crying. Dad had somehow reached across death itself to comfort me. Then, his handwriting became firmer, almost as though he wanted to make absolutely certain I paid attention. "There's something else I need you to know. If anyone pressures you after I'm gone, do not sign anything." I froze. Read the sentence again. Then again. He knew. Somehow, he knew this would happen. The next paragraph made my heart pound. "There are people I trust. There are people I love. And sometimes, those aren't the same people. Please visit Richard Collins before making any decisions. Say nothing to anyone until you've seen him. Especially Derek," I whispered aloud. "What did you know, Dad?" Near the bottom of the letter, he wrote one final message. Some people inherit money. I hope you inherit wisdom, because wisdom protects what money never can. I love you forever, Dad. I sat there for nearly an hour, the letter pressed against my chest, thinking about every conversation we'd had during those last few months, every strange warning, every unfinished sentence, every thoughtful pause. He'd been preparing me, not for his death, for what would happen after it. The next morning, I called Richard Collins, Dad's attorney. His receptionist answered almost immediately. Mr. Collins has actually been expecting your call. I frowned. Expecting it? Yes, Miss Parker. He asked that if you contacted us, we should schedule you immediately. My heart skipped. When can I come? There was a brief pause. How soon can you get here? 40 minutes later, I parked outside one of the oldest law offices in the city. The brick building looked untouched by time. Dark wood doors, brass nameplates, tall windows. It felt less like a business and more like a place where secrets had been safely kept for generations. Richard Collins himself opened the door before I even reached the reception desk. He looked to be in his late 60s, kind eyes, silver hair, perfect posture. He shook my hand warmly. Grace, I'm deeply sorry about your father. Thank you. He looked at me carefully. Did Thomas leave you a personal letter? I stared. How did you know? A gentle smile appeared. Because I helped him prepare for this day. Then his expression became serious. Come with me. There are some things your father wanted you to know. He led me into his private office, closed the heavy wooden door, locked it, then walked toward a large fireproof safe built into the wall. After entering a long combination, he removed a sealed military green document case. Across the front, in my father's handwriting, was written, "To be opened only with my daughter." Grace Parker. Richard carefully placed it on the desk, then looked directly into my eyes. Grace, everything Derek Lawson believes about your father's estate is about to collapse. Richard Collins didn't touch the military green document case immediately. Instead, he rested both hands on the desk and looked at me with an expression somewhere between sadness and admiration. Your father always said you were the strongest person he knew. I managed a weak smile. I don't feel very strong. He nodded. Nobody does after losing a parent. Silence filled the office. Finally, he slid the sealed case toward me. This belongs to you. My hands trembled as I broke the wax seal. Inside, there wasn't a will. There wasn't a property deed. There were several neatly organized folders. A handwritten notebook, a military challenge coin, and another envelope. Across the front, Dad had written only 3 words. Read this first. I carefully unfolded the letter. Kiddo, if you've reached this point, then Richard has already explained enough to convince you not to panic. I laughed softly through my tears. Even now, Dad somehow knew exactly how I would feel. There's something I never told you, not because I didn't trust you, because I wanted you to live your life without carrying unnecessary burdens. Some promises must be kept until the right moment. I continued reading. After your mother died, I rewrote every legal document I owned, not once, several times. Each version taught me something about people. My heart skipped. What did he mean? Richard quietly waited while I kept reading. Grace, I watched how both of my daughters chose to live. One chose ambition, the other chose sacrifice. Neither choice made me love either of you less, but it taught me who could be trusted when life became difficult. Tears rolled down my cheeks again. Dad hadn't been choosing favorites. He'd been observing character. The next paragraph answered the question that had haunted me since Derek arrived. If Derek Lawson pressures you, he's acting exactly as I expected. I stopped reading, slowly looked at Richard. He knew. Richard nodded. Long before you did. He opened one of the folders. Inside were dated notes, letters, copies of legal correspondence, meeting summaries. Dad had documented everything. Richard spoke quietly. About 18 months ago, your father asked me to investigate several unusual requests. What requests? Derek repeatedly contacted our office. I frowned. About what? He wanted your father to transfer the property into Vanessa's name while he was still alive. I stared. Dad never told me. He didn't want to hurt you. Richard handed me another document. It was a copy of an email. Derek had written, "Maintaining the property has become too difficult for Colonel Parker. Vanessa and I can manage everything for him. We're only trying to help." I looked up, but Dad never even discussed selling. Richard sighed. "I know. There were 6 similar requests. Every one of them was denied." Another folder contained handwritten notes from meetings. Dad had written everything: dates, times, conversations. One page caught my attention immediately. Meeting with Derek. April 14th, I began reading. Derek insists Grace should move on with her life. Interesting. He never once asked how my health was. Only about the property taxes. My stomach tightened. Another page. Meeting with Vanessa. She believes the house should remain within the successful branch of the family. I whispered. "No." Richard nodded sadly. "Unfortunately, yes." I closed the notebook. "I don't understand. If Dad knew this, why didn't he confront them?" Richard smiled gently. "Because your father believed something." "What?" "People reveal themselves more clearly when they think no one is watching." He opened another envelope. This one contained official legal documents. "Grace, your father never intended to divide his estate the traditional way." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means the house was never the real inheritance." He handed me the final signed version of Dad's will. My eyes immediately searched for the section dividing the estate. Instead, I found something completely unexpected. The Parker Family Heritage Trust. I looked confused. "I've never heard of this." Richard smiled. "Very few people have." He explained slowly. 3 years earlier, Dad had quietly transferred nearly everything he owned into an irrevocable trust, not because he feared dying, because he feared conflict after his death. The house, his military pension savings, investment accounts, insurance policies, even several acres of family land outside the city. Everything. Nothing legally belonged to the estate Derek thought he was claiming. I blinked. So, the papers Derek brought were meaningless. Richard nodded. "They only work if you voluntarily sign away your beneficial interest." I felt a chill run through me. He knew. He suspected, Richard corrected gently. "He never expected your father to prepare this thoroughly." I leaned back, trying to absorb everything. "So, who controls the trust?" Richard smiled. "You." I stared. "Me?" "And 2 additional trustees." "Who?" He reached into the folder, removed 2 sealed appointment letters. The first name surprised me. Richard Collins. That made sense. The second one didn't. Brigadier General Michael Reynolds. I looked up. "I don't know him." Richard smiled. "No, but your father trusted him with his life." He walked toward the bookshelf, picked up an old framed photograph. 3 young Army officers stood together. One was Dad. Another wore the name Reynolds. The third had been crossed out with black ink years earlier. "Dad never talked much about the Army," I said quietly. Richard nodded. "He talked even less about the people who protected him." Then Richard's expression became serious. "Grace, there's one more thing." He reached into the bottom drawer of his desk, removed another sealed envelope. Unlike everything else, this one carried an official Department of Defense seal. My heart immediately started racing. "What is this?" Richard looked directly into my eyes. "Instructions. From your father. They weren't activated until the day after his funeral." I frowned. "I don't understand." "You will," he answered calmly. He opened the envelope. Inside was a certified letter signed by Brigadier General Michael Reynolds. Richard handed it to me. The first sentence sent chills through my body. "Per Colonel Thomas Parker's written request, military police have been instructed to secure and transfer his protected military archives and personal effects directly to his designated heir." Military police? I looked up. Dad involved the military? Richard nodded. "Not because of money, because of history." He lowered his voice. "Your father spent decades protecting classified operational records. After retirement, several legally protected military documents remained in his personal custody until they could be archived." I frowned. "They're still at the house?" "Yes. And according to federal procedure, they must be transferred in person." A strange feeling settled over me. "So, military police are actually coming?" Richard smiled. "They're already scheduled." "When?" He checked his watch. "This afternoon." My heart skipped. "Today?" They'll arrive around 4. Before I could process that, my phone suddenly vibrated. The screen displayed one name, Vanessa. I let it ring, then another call. This time, Derek, then another, and another. 6 missed calls within 3 minutes. Richard looked at the screen. They're getting nervous. Why? Because they expected you to sign yesterday. He paused, and people who rush others usually become impatient when delayed. Just then, Richard's receptionist knocked gently on the office door. "Mr. Collins?" He looked up. "Yes?" She hesitated. "There are 2 people here, insisting they need to speak with Miss Parker." Richard frowned. "Who?" she answered quietly. "Her sister. And Mr. Derek Lawson." Richard slowly stood, looked toward me, then smiled calmly. I had a feeling they wouldn't wait until tomorrow. Outside the office, I could already hear Derek's raised voice echoing through the reception area. He had come looking for me, but this time, he wasn't just asking me to sign. He sounded furious, and neither of us knew that within the next 2 hours, military police would arrive at my father's house, turning Derek's entire plan upside down. The reception area had gone completely silent. Every employee had stopped working. No one pretended to look at their computers anymore. Everyone was watching Derek Lawson. He stood in the middle of the room with his jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might crack a tooth. Vanessa stood beside him, wringing her hands. She looked frightened. Not frightened for me, frightened that something was slipping beyond their control. The moment Derek saw me, he took 3 quick steps forward. "There you are." His voice was sharp enough to make the receptionist flinch. "I've been calling you for an hour. I know. You ignored me." "Yes." His eyes narrowed. "We need to finish this today." I looked at him calmly. "No." His face turned red. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean exactly what I said. I'm not signing anything." Richard Collins stepped between us. "Mr. Lawson, this is private legal business. I'd appreciate it if you lowered your voice." Derek barely looked at him. "This concerns my family," Richard answered calmly. "No, it concerns my client's family, and Miss Parker is my client." The room became quiet again. I noticed Vanessa looking around nervously. She hated public attention, especially when it wasn't flattering. Derek pointed toward me. "She's being manipulated." Richard smiled politely. "Interesting. By whom?" "You." Richard chuckled softly. "I've represented Colonel Thomas Parker for 26 years. I assure you, I never needed to manipulate him." For the first time, I saw uncertainty cross Derek's face. It lasted only a second, then it disappeared. He straightened his tie. "Fine. We'll settle this another way." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out another folder. "I've already spoken with my attorney." Richard didn't even glance at it. "I'm sure you have." Derek stepped closer to me. "Grace, I'm trying to help you." "No, I don't think you are. You can't maintain that property." "I'll decide that. You'll lose everything." I looked directly into his eyes. My father didn't spend his life teaching me courage, so I could surrender it because someone raised their voice. For a moment, the receptionist smiled. I think she had been silently cheering for me. Vanessa finally spoke. "Grace, we're still sisters." I turned toward her. "Were we sisters? When Dad spent 3 nights in the hospital last winter?" She froze. "You never came." Her lips parted. Were we sisters when I called because Dad kept asking if you'd visit?" Silence. "You said Derek had a golf tournament." She lowered her eyes. "I remember." "No. You remember now." I wasn't trying to embarrass her. I genuinely wanted to understand, because the Vanessa I grew up with would never have become this person. I remembered one summer afternoon when I was 11. I'd fallen off my bicycle, scraped both knees badly. Vanessa had been 16. She ran all the way home carrying me because I couldn't walk. That girl would have protected me from anyone. What happened to her? Dad used to say something whenever we argued. Nobody changes overnight. They change one decision at a time. Maybe this was where those decisions had led. Derek looked impatient. "We're done here." He turned toward the exit, then stopped. Looked back at me. "You have until tonight. If these papers aren't signed, we'll handle this differently." The threat hung in the air, clear enough for everyone to understand, subtle enough that he couldn't be accused of making it. Richard's expression hardened. I strongly recommend that you leave now." 10 minutes later, they were gone. I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. Richard poured 2 cups of coffee. Neither of us drank much. He looked thoughtful. They're becoming desperate. Because of the trust? Because they no longer control the timeline. He checked his watch. "It's almost 3. The military police should arrive at your father's house around 4. My stomach tightened. "I should go." "I agree." Before leaving, Richard handed me a thick envelope. "If anything happens, call me immediately." I nodded. "I will." The drive home felt strangely peaceful. The autumn trees lining the streets glowed shades of gold and crimson. Dad loved this time of year. Every October, he insisted we take a drive through the countryside. No destination, just windows down. Fresh air, old country music playing softly through the radio. One year, I asked him why we always drove the same road. He smiled. "Because success teaches you to chase new places. But happiness sometimes asks you to appreciate the ones you've already found." When I pulled into the driveway, my heart immediately sank. A black luxury SUV sat in front of the house. Derek's. He hadn't listened. I parked behind him, walked quickly toward the front porch. The front door was unlocked. Inside, voices echoed through the living room. Derek was yelling. Vanessa stood nearby, looking pale. The moment I entered, Derek spun around. "There you are." His smile looked forced. "I've been waiting." I calmly set my purse on the table. "You shouldn't be inside my house." He laughed. "For now." I ignored him and walked toward Dad's military display. The glass door hung open. One of the medals had been removed. I froze. My heart started pounding. I looked at Derek. "Where is it?" "What?" "The bronze star." He shrugged. "I was looking at it." "Where is it?" He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled it out carelessly, and tossed it onto the dining table. The medal slid across the polished wood before stopping inches from me. I stared at it, unable to believe what I'd just witnessed. That medal wasn't just metal. Dad had earned it after pulling 2 wounded soldiers from a burning vehicle. He never talked about it. I learned the story years later from another veteran. He always said, "I was simply doing my job." Now, someone had thrown it across a table like spare change. I picked it up gently, then placed it back inside the display case. My hands shook, not with fear, with anger. I slowly turned around. "You need to leave." Derek smiled. "After you sign." "I'm done talking." He walked closer. "I'm not," Vanessa whispered. "Derek, enough." He ignored her completely. He pulled the papers from his briefcase, placed them on the table again, then slapped the pen beside them. "So, one last time, sign." I didn't even look at the documents. No. Everything changed. His face twisted with rage. In 3 quick steps, he crossed the room. Before I could react, he grabbed my wrist. Hard. Pain shot through my arm. "Derek," I said quietly. "Let go." Instead, his grip tightened. "You've always been weak," he hissed. "You let your father fill your head with fairy tales. My father taught me integrity. He taught you poverty." I tried pulling away. He yanked me closer. The papers fell onto the floor. Vanessa gasped. "Derek!" He didn't listen. He shoved me backward. My shoulders struck the dining room wall. The framed family photograph crashed onto the floor. Glass shattered everywhere. The picture inside showed Dad standing between both of us, his arms around his daughters. Now it lay broken beneath our feet. I looked at Vanessa, waiting, begging, "Do something, say something, please." She stood frozen. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't move. Derek stepped closer again, his face only inches from mine. "Do you know what your problem is? You think kindness wins. It doesn't. Power wins." Then he wrapped one hand around my throat, not tightly enough to choke me unconscious, just enough that I couldn't breathe properly, just enough to frighten me. I grabbed his wrist, trying to pull it away. "Derek!" My voice barely escaped. Vanessa screamed. "Stop!" He ignored her. "Sign," he whispered, "or lose everything." At that exact moment, 3 loud knocks echoed through the house. Bang, bang, bang. Derek froze. Another knock, even louder. A calm, authoritative voice came from the other side of the door. "Military police. We're looking for Miss Grace Parker." Every person in the room stopped moving. Even Derek slowly released my throat. The house fell completely silent. The knock came again. Then the voice repeated, "Miss Parker, we have official orders regarding Colonel Thomas Parker's protected military property." I looked at Derek. For the first time since this nightmare began, the confidence had completely vanished from his face. Nobody moved. Not me. Not Vanessa. Not Derek. The entire house had fallen so silent that I could hear the old grandfather clock in the hallway ticking. Tick, tick, tick. Another firm knock echoed through the front door. "Military police. Miss Grace Parker, please come to the door." Derek slowly removed his hand from my throat. His confidence had vanished. He looked toward the window, then back at me. What is this?" I rubbed my neck, trying to steady my breathing. "I don't know." It wasn't entirely true. Richard Collins had warned me they were coming, but I still had no idea why, or what would happen next. Another knock, more patient this time. "Miss Parker?" I walked toward the front door. My legs felt strangely weak. Behind me, Derek whispered to Vanessa, "Don't say anything." She nodded automatically. For once, I didn't think she even realized she'd done it. I opened the door. 3 military police officers stood on my porch in immaculate dress uniforms. Their posture was perfect. Behind them stood a distinguished man in his early 70s. Tall, silver hair, navy blazer, decorated veteran's lapel pin. His calm blue eyes immediately reminded me of my father. One of the officers saluted. "Miss Grace Parker?" "Yes, I'm Captain Andrew Miller." He handed me a leather folder. "We're here under written instructions left by Colonel Thomas Parker." He paused. "May we come inside?" I stepped aside. Of course. The officers entered quietly. Professional, respectful. They weren't looking around the house. They weren't interested in Derek. They were there for one reason only: my father. The older gentleman walked toward me. He extended his hand. "I'm Brigadier General Michael Reynolds." His voice was warm. "I served with your father for 23 years. I shook his hand. "I've heard about you." He smiled sadly. "I wish we'd met under happier circumstances." "So do I." He looked around the room. His eyes landed on the broken family photograph lying on the floor. Then, on the red marks around my neck. His expression changed. Only slightly, but enough for me to notice. Captain Miller looked toward me. "Miss Parker, before we continue, I need to ask, has anyone interfered with Colonel Parker's protected military property?" Before I could answer, his eyes shifted toward the open display case. The missing bronze star rested on the dining table. His face immediately became serious. He walked over, carefully picked up the medal using white gloves, then looked directly at Derek. "Who removed this decoration?" Silence. No one answered. Finally, I quietly said, "He did." Captain Miller looked at Derek. "Sir, did you remove a federally protected military decoration from its secured display?" Derek cleared his throat. "I was only looking at it." The captain's voice remained calm. "You removed it?" "Yes." The captain nodded once, then wrote something inside a small notebook. Derek's face turned pale. General Reynolds walked slowly to the display case. He stood there for several moments, looking at my father's medals, his folded flag, the old photograph. Then he smiled softly. "Thomas always polished these himself." I nodded. "Every Memorial Day." The general chuckled. "He made us polish ours too." For the first time in days, I actually smiled. He turned toward me. "Your father talked about you constantly." "He did?" "Oh yes," he said. The general laughed quietly. "My youngest daughter is the only officer I was ever truly afraid of." I laughed through fresh tears. "That sounds exactly like him. He adored you." Then General Reynolds became serious. "Miss Parker, your father asked me to witness something." Captain Miller stepped forward carrying a locked military case. He placed it carefully on the dining table, the same table where Derek had thrown his paperwork only minutes earlier. The captain unlocked the case. Inside were several sealed envelopes, military documents, and a beautifully carved wooden box. General Reynolds gently lifted the box. "Thomas asked that I personally give this to you." I accepted it carefully. My hands trembled. Inside lay my father's army watch, his challenge coin, his wedding ring, and one final handwritten letter. I immediately recognized his handwriting. Across the front he had written, Open when your heart is ready. I couldn't stop crying. General Reynolds placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. There's no rush. He knew today would be difficult. He planned for that. Captain Miller then removed another sealed envelope. This document concerns Colonel Parker's estate. Derek suddenly stepped forward. I'm actually family. The captain looked at him politely. I understand, but this isn't addressed to you. The captain handed the envelope to me. I opened it slowly. Inside was an official legal certification, signed by Richard Collins, signed by General Reynolds, signed by my father. Captain Miller spoke clearly enough for everyone in the room to hear. Colonel Thomas Parker legally transferred all protected assets into the Parker Family Heritage Trust 3 years ago. My heart skipped. He continued. Miss Grace Parker is the primary beneficiary and managing trustee. The room became completely silent. Then he added one sentence that changed everything. Neither the residence nor the protected assets are part of the public estate. Derek frowned. What? Captain Miller calmly repeated. The property cannot legally be transferred through private agreements. Derek stared. That's impossible. General Reynolds finally spoke. No, it's excellent planning. Derek grabbed his briefcase, pulled out the paperwork he'd been trying to force me to sign. This agreement, Richard Collins walked through the still open front door. He'd arrived quietly behind the officers. I'm afraid, he interrupted, that agreement would have transferred rights your client never possessed. Derek slowly turned. You? Richard nodded. Me? Richard walked toward the table, placed another folder beside Derek's paperwork. This, he said calmly, is Colonel Parker's final registered trust. He opened it. Every signature, every notarization, every witness, everything perfectly documented. Richard looked directly at Derek. You've been trying to convince Miss Parker to surrender something. That already belongs to her. Derek's confidence collapsed. This wasn't supposed to happen. General Reynolds looked at him. No, it was. The general reached into his jacket pocket. He removed a folded piece of paper. Thomas asked me to read this aloud if there was ever conflict between his daughters. He unfolded it, then began reading. If this letter is being read, it means my greatest fear came true. Not that I died. Every soldier knows that day comes. My fear was that grief would divide my daughters. I looked at Vanessa. She was already crying. The general continued, Vanessa, if you're standing in this room, please know, I have loved you every single day of your life. Success isn't measured by the size of your home or the balance of your bank account. It's measured by the people who still trust you when life becomes difficult. Vanessa covered her mouth, sobbing. Grace, if you're hearing this, thank you. You gave me something no inheritance could ever repay, time. You sat beside hospital beds. You missed vacations. You held my hand when I could no longer hold a coffee cup without spilling it. Those moments became the richest years of my life. I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. The general paused before reading the final paragraph. To both my daughters. Money can build houses. Only love builds homes. If either of you leaves this room richer, but poorer in character, then I've failed as your father. Please, choose each other before it's too late. The room remained silent. No one spoke. Even Derek looked at the floor. Finally, Vanessa walked toward me. Slowly, carefully. She stopped only a few feet away. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry. I looked at her. For the first time in years, I didn't see arrogance. I saw shame. Real shame. She turned toward Derek. What have we become? He looked stunned. Vanessa. No, she interrupted. My father begged for family. I gave him excuses. He needed his daughters. I sent flowers. Fresh tears streamed down her face. I let you convince me that success mattered more than showing up. Derek reached for her hand. She stepped back. No, I'm done making your decisions my responsibility. She looked at me again. I don't expect forgiveness. I haven't earned it. She wiped away tears. I wish I could have one more day with Dad, I whispered. So do I. Several months passed. The house stayed exactly where Dad wanted it. I restored the broken family photograph. The cracked glass remained visible. I chose not to replace it. because healing doesn't erase scars. It teaches us to live with them. Vanessa filed for divorce 6 months later, not because of the inheritance, because she finally admitted she'd spent years becoming someone she no longer recognized. It wasn't an instant redemption. Trust took time. Years, actually. She started visiting every Sunday. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we simply shared coffee on Dad's old porch. Slowly, we became sisters again. General Reynolds remained part of my life. Every Memorial Day, he visited. Together we polished Dad's medals, just as Dad always had. One afternoon, nearly a year later, I finally opened the last letter from the wooden box, the one marked, "Open when your heart is ready." Inside, Dad had written only a few lines. "Kiddo, if you're reading this, then you've survived the hardest part. Don't spend the rest of your life proving people wrong. Spend it proving kindness right. Love, Dad." I folded the letter carefully, walked outside, and sat beneath the old oak tree Dad had planted the year I was born. The evening sun filtered gently through its branches. A soft breeze rustled the leaves overhead. For just a moment, I could almost hear his voice again. "Never let anyone rush you into a permanent decision." I smiled, looked toward the house he had filled with love, and realized something that no lawyer, no fortune, and no piece of paper could ever change. My father hadn't left me a house. He hadn't left me money. He hadn't even left me an inheritance. He had left me something far more valuable, the courage to protect what truly mattered.